We resume our tale right where we left off, with the conclusion of the battle trial exercise. As Class 1A, Maya and Suzuku meet back up with All Might to discuss the last of the battle trial matches, and shortly afterward, congratulating the class on a good training session, relieved that there were no major injuries other than Izuku and Vegito, although the latter's was more mental than physical. After all this is said and done, All Might bids 1A goodbye before running off in a flash, wanting to check on Izuku's progress. All Might then notices the silent Bakugo, noting his pride and that it's his job to counsel him well, although they'll have to wait for now. All Might then transforms back into his skinny form, heading to Recovery Girl's office, with a nurse chastising All Might for not stopping his protege from getting this hurt. But this is a lighter scolding than canon, since other than her healing him after the entrance exam, this is Izuku's first visit with Recovery Girl. Afterwards, Vegito changes out of his hero costume, heading to Recovery Girl's office as he wants to check on Izuku, thinking to himself, Aunt Inko's going to kill me for letting this happen to Izuku on my watch. And after a few minutes, Vegito arrives at Recovery Girl's office, witnessing a scene of Recovery Girl scolding All Might, and also seeing a baby crib next to Recovery Girl's desk with an infant inside. Afterwards, All Might notices the young Saiyan, saying, "What are you doing here, Vegito?" But the young Saiyan responds that he just wanted to check on his brother. Recovery Girl then tells the young Saiyan that his brother should be fine after he rests overnight, and that he should head back to class. Afterwards, Vegito then decides to ask Recovery Girl about the baby crib, asking whose kid that is, although the nurse says, "That's private. Although I'll let you know this, if you make her cry, then there's 4 teachers here that'll make you regret it." Vegito then responds with, "Oh, no worries. I definitely can understand that," before heading out the door, but not before remembering something as Vegito turns around, asking the nurse, "Also, Recovery Girl, did you happen to tell our mom about Izuku's injury?" As the nurse, to Vegito's relief, says that she called their mother about Izuku's injury, with the young Saiyan heading back to class, where events play out like canon, with Aizawa going over the results of the battle trial. As after class, Izuku comes back, worried that Aizawa will choke him with his scarf for missing his afternoon classes, with Vegito running over to Izuku to check on him. Afterwards, Izuku notices Bakugo's absence as he asks his brother where Bakugo went, with Vegito explaining that Bakugo just left. Izuku and Bakugo's talk ends up going as canon, although he mentions Vegito's fight against Shoto, even agreeing with what Momo said about his attack being a foolish move to use in an indoor battle. The next day, after dropping Akari off at school, the bros are then ambushed by the press. After learning that All Might has become a UA teacher, are at the UA campus trying to get an interview with the Symbol of Peace. Although due to All Might being off campus that day, they fail. Although the reporters notice Vegito's quirk and hairstyle, and point out the young Saiyan as the son of the former number 3 hero Uzaru, and former number 7 hero Mindstorm, and ask him a massive amount of questions about his parents, which makes him noticeably uncomfortable. All at the same time, Bakugo is trying to get around the crowd, and so uses his quirk to try and get through, but this also has a side effect of letting out the smell of burning flesh, which causes Vegito to flash back to an event that took place just over 2 years ago at this point, as he sees the burning corpses of his bio parents. As this ultimately causes the young Saiyan to start having a full-on panic attack from reliving the tragic event. During this time, Ochako arrives and stumbles upon the scene of Vegito on his knees, gripping his knuckles uncontrollably, with Ochako asking Izuku what's wrong with Vegito. Izuku then says that after they started smelling bacon, Vegito just started having a full-on panic attack, with Ochako asking why the smell of bacon would cause Vegito to have a panic attack like that, as Izuku explains that the smell of cooked pork reminds him of the death of his parents. Ochako then asks Izuku why the reporters were asking Vegito questions about Uzaru and Mindstorm, with Izuku revealing that Uzaro and Mindstorm are Vegito's parents. Ochako takes this in and says that she's going to go get Ida and Momo to see if they can help, telling Izuku to try and stay with Vegito while she goes to get help. A few minutes pass as Ochako manages to spot both Ida and Momo in the panicking crowd, with the girl trying to get to them so she can get help for Vegito, and after some time, Ochako manages to get to Momo and Ida, explaining what's going on to the pair. The pair take this in and say, hey, that they'll help, with the trio making it back over to Vegito and Izuku, where they see that Vegito has managed to rip off one of the sleeves of his shirt, and that Vegito is currently ripping off the other sleeve with his teeth. Ida, Momo, Izuku, and Ochako then all surround Vegito, with Momo being on his front, Izuku behind him, and Ochako and Ida on his sides, as Momo ends up hugging Vegito during this. Vegito hugs Momo tightly saying, "It's alright, Akari, your big brother's gonna keep you safe." Momo is a bit confused at this, but before she can ask Vegito who Akari is, the panicking crowd causes Momo and Vegito to be knocked closer together and accidentally kiss, as Izuku, Ochako, and Ida are shocked at seeing this, although they're not the only ones to witness this kiss, as this is watched by Mina, as she gasps and says, "I knew it! I'm so telling the other girls! I'll call this ship Momito!" As she leaves to go tell the other girls in their class, with Vegito and Momo stopping their accidental kiss, as Momo decides to ask the question, Vegito, who's Akari? With this managing to snap Vegito out of his panic attack, allowing the group to move Vegito away from the vultures to a safer location inside UA's campus. Vegito then asks his friends what happened, where he is, and where his sleeves, with Izuku explaining everything that happened, including that he and Momo kissed. Vegito takes this in, and his face ends up turning beet red, as Momo starts feeling his forehead, asking if he's alright, and Ida, he's burning up. Vegito then says that he's just a bit hot is all, although Ida says that it's actually quite nice out here. Momo asks Vegito if she should take him to the nurse, although Vegito says that he's fine. Momo decides to ask her friend, Vegito, who is this Akari person? With Vegito revealing that Akari is his 6-year-old sister, Izuku revealing that Vegito and Akari were the only survivors from the attack that claimed the lives of their parents. Ida then says that they should probably get to class, and Izuku hands Vegito his sleeves. During this time, Mina is going around the class, telling all of the 1A girls present what she saw earlier, with all the girls being excited at this news. After this, Aizawa announces that they'll need to choose a class representative, and afterwards, Mina then starts passing notes run and say they should vote Vegito and Momo as class rep, and vice rep respectively, with Mina managing to get Tsuyu, Jiro, Toru, Kirishima, and Kaminari on board with the idea. She also tries to convince Shoto, but Vegito, Izuku, Momo, Ochako, and Ida arrive before she can do this. The quintet take their seats and cast their votes for class rep, as Shoto notices Vegito is a bit shaken up after what happened, and decides to ask if he's alright, but the young saying, "Not really. Those damn vultures ended up not only bringing up my parents, which in addition to me smelling pork, it apparently caused me to have a panic attack. At least, that's what Izuku and Yagorozu told me." After some time, the votes are tallied, made up, and Aizawa announces that the class rep will be Vegito Midoriya, and the vice rep will be Momo Yagorozu, as Mia says to herself, "Yes! My plan worked!" With Vegito and Momo deciding to give each other a congratulatory hug, saying, "Well, Vegito, I would have preferred having the class rep position, but if I had to lose to someone, I'm glad it was to you. Thanks. I'm glad we get to lead the class together, Momo." As Vegito then turns beet red before saying, "Whoops, I mean Yagorozu. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to call you by your first name." With Momo giggling a bit and saying, "It's fine, really. You can call me Momo if you want. Since I already referred to you by your first name, I think it's fine if you refer to me by mine." Vegito then smiles and says, "Well, Momo it is then." With Mia then saying, Hey, you two should kiss! With both Vegito and Momo turning as red as a tomato with this. Later that day at lunch, we see Izuku, Vegito, Ochako, Ida, Momo, and Shoto all eating lunch together. Shoto is present here due to his canon arc being accelerated thanks to the Christmas special, while Vegito is eating a massive Scooby-Doo sandwich that looks extremely similar to Pierre's Poor Boy sandwich from Zombie Island. As Momo, Ochako, and Ida are shocked at how much Vegito's eating, while Momo points out at some ham on that sandwich, with young San explaining that while he doesn't really eat cooked pork, due to it not only making him sick to his stomach, due to what happened to his parents, and that the smell reminds him of burning flesh, although cold cuts like ham and salami are the sole exception for him, since you don't really cook those. Ochako then asks Izuku how he isn't shocked by how much Vegito's eating, saying, "Deku, how were you completely unfazed by how much Vegito's eating?" And Izuku says that this is tame in compared to some of his already eating feats. And the night before Akari was born, Vegito ended up cleaning out his mom's entire refrigerator. And then after they became brothers, he ended up cleaning out an entire Chinese buffet, minus the pork. Shoto then adds his own experience with Vegito's appetite, saying that he once saw Vegito eat 15 Big Macs. And then last Christmas, he ended up eating a whole roast duck, adding that he dislocated his jaw like a snake and literally ate the duck whole, minus the head and neck, and then proceeded to spit out the bones like an owl. Momo, Ochako, and Ida are horrified to hear about this, with Ida asking Vegito how he's even able to do something like that. But Shoto explains that his dad's still trying to figure that one out. Afterwards, Momo asks Vegito what Akari is like, with Vegito telling her how sweet and caring she is, adding in on her 6th birthday, when he invited her friend Koda over for a playdate, and when he got hurt, she tried applying first aid before she came to get him for help. Shoto then adds that Vegito is very protective over Akari, before warning the group to never, ever make Akari cry. Ochako then asks, what kind of monster would intentionally make a little kid cry? As Vegito gives Shoto a knowing look before saying, yeah, you have any ideas about that, Shoto? With Shoto nervously rubbing the back of his head. After all this, Momo then says that Akari sounds really sweet, and that she hopes she'll get to meet her someday. From here, events can line back up with canon for a bit, with the group learning about Ida being the younger brother of Ingenium, and the stuff with the vultures stays the same, due to Momo staying with Vegito, so he doesn't have another panic attack because of those vultures. And due to Vegito being more confident in Izuku, he wouldn't relinquish the class rep position to Ida. After school, Vegito and Izuku head back over to Akari's school to pick her up, as Akari runs over to her brother, with Vegito picking the child up. Although Fuyumi notices Vegito's missing shirt sleeves and decides to ask the young Saiyan about it, saying, Vegito, what happened to your sleeves? With Izuku stepping in to explain the day's events. And to the older Todoroki, with Fuyumi being very concerned for Vegito, asking if he's alright, and calling up Inko at her work to explain what happened, as Inko is horrified to hear her middle child had a panic attack, and that he ripped off his shirt sleeves, as Inko says that she can't afford a winter shirt for Vegito at the moment, and that she can barely afford to feed him. Although Fuyumi says that Vegito could just wear his summer shirt, since Vegito does have a strong distaste for long sleeves. Inko says that could work, but each of her boys only have one uniform shirt each, and doing laundry every night is making her water bill higher than she'd like. But Fuyumi says that she could try to get Enji to help her out, and considering Vegito is Enji's godson, she's sure he'd find it no trouble at all to help her out. Inko thanks Fuyumi for this before hanging up, as Fuyumi tells the Midoriya trio they should get home, since she knows particularly Vegito's had a long day. Vegito says that sounds good, but also says to Akari, Akari, your hair is getting a little long, so what do you say I give you a haircut after we get done with dinner? Akari agrees to the idea, although Fuyumi asks if he's sure he can do that, considering what happened earlier that day. But Vegito says, "Don't worry, Fuyumi. I've been cutting Akari's hair for years, especially after the last time she went to a hair salon. Boy, that was rough." With the Midoriya trio leaving Fuyumi's classroom and heading home to the apartment, with Vegito telling Izuku to go ahead and grab a stool, shampoo, conditioner, 2 towels, Akari's hairbrush, a comb, and a pair of scissors. Since while he isn't cutting Akari's hair until after dinner, he wants to go ahead and get everything ready now. Eventually, Inko gets home and notices all the haircut stuff out in the kitchen, as the green-haired woman asks her middle child about it, with Vegito explaining, "Well, Akari needs a haircut, and since today's a wash day for her hair, I figured I'd kill 2 birds with 1 stone." From here, dinner is pretty uneventful, other than discussing the events of Vegito's panic attack and Vegito ripping off his shirt sleeves. Afterwards, Vegito takes Akari over to the sink before having her sit on the stool and at her checking the water to make sure it isn't too hot, as Akari leans her head back over the sink as he starts washing the child's hair. And after some time, Vegito gets Akari's hair washed with both the shampoo and conditioner to not only clean it, but also to get it nice and soft. Afterwards, Vegito ends up using one of the towels to partially dry her hair so it isn't completely soaking wet, before covering her up with the other towel so that Akari doesn't get hair all over her clothes. Afterwards, Vegito secures the other towel in place with the hair clip before grabbing the comb and scissors and getting to work. While Vegito's cutting Akari's hair, Inko ends up saying, "Okay, that is so cute!" While Izuku agrees with his mother on this, as after some time, Vegito manages to get Akari's hair trimmed back down to her elbows, with Vegito grabbing a blow dryer to finish drying Akari's hair, and handing the child a mirror so she can see the finished product. As the child says, "I love it! Thanks, big brother!" With Akari taking off the towel and hugging her brother, as Vegito goes to grab a broom and dustpan to clean up the hair. Afterwards, Vegito heads to his room to relax for a bit, as Akari comes in after him, before hopping on Vegito's bed and climbing up onto her favorite spot on top of her brother, with Vegito deciding to turn on a movie on his PS5, grabbing a hair tie shortly afterward, and deciding to braid Akari's hair, as Akari just has the biggest smile on her face from not only her new haircut, but also having her hair played with. The next day, Vegito ends up taking Akari to her school, since Vegito told Izuku that he'd handle things with that, and ends up bringing her into the classroom, with Fuyumi being happy to greet Akari and noticing her new haircut, compliments Akari on it, as the child thanks her teacher for this. Although Fuyumi points out to Vegito that he didn't really cut off too much, but Vegito says, "Well, Fuyumi, you know Akari likes her hair long, and as long as she takes care of it, I let her keep it long." Vegito then notices a girl around Akari's age hiding behind Fuyumi's leg with pale skin, snow white hair that's styled into a bowl cut with bangs, light blue eyes and matching sclera, and what looks to be the tail of a white tiger with matching ears. Vegito decides to ask Fuyumi about it, as the older Todoroki introduces the child as Kirara Yukiguni, explaining that she's rather skittish due to how some people respond to her quirk, with Kirara nervously saying, "I want to go home." But Fuyumi reassures the child by saying that she should be safe here. Akari then decides to ask Fuyumi what Kirara's quirk is, as Fuyumi explains, like her hero Mirko, Kirara has an animal quirk, and while Mirko is a rabbit heteromorph, Kirara is a white tiger one. Afterwards, Vegito notices Koda arriving in the classroom with his aunt Mandalay here to drop him off, with Koda coming over to greet his best friend, while Vegito and Mandalay start to catch up, with the hero asking Vegito how life at UA is going, as Vegito reveals that he managed to become his class rep, with Mandalay congratulating him on that. Afterwards, Mandalay leaves, saying that while she'd love to have more time to catch up with Vegito, she's got hero work to do. Afterwards, Vegito then gets down on Akari's level and says, "Well, Akari, I think I have an idea for how we can help Kirara. Why don't you and Kota go try and make a new friend? Akari agrees to this, and also sees their other friend approaching them, with Kota introducing the other boy to Kirara as Mario Falzone. With Mario approaching Vegito, as the young thing gives Mario a high five, and says, "Oh, hey Mario! How's your dad doing? I haven't gotten to stop in and see Vito in a while." Mario then says that his dad's doing pretty good, even if he's missed seeing his #1 customer for a while. Afterwards, Akari grabs Mario's hand and tells him about their plans with friend Kirara, with Fuyumi saying, "Just don't pull our tail, you three." The three friends then approach Kirara, who's shocked at how kind Akari, Mario, and Kota are to her, since she's rather skittish due to how some people respond to her quirk. But Mario says he thinks her quirk is really cool, and that it reminds him a lot of Mirko, which makes Kirara happy due to her looking up to Mirko. Afterwards, Kota tries petting her, which Kirara is a bit happy about, while Akari ends up comparing her to her Meowscarada on our Pokemon Violet team. But this makes Kirara ask, "What's a Meowscarada?" With Vegito saying that he'll show her, before pulling out his phone and pulling up a picture of Meowscarada, as Kirara says, "So, it's a cat magician?" Vegito and Akari both confirm this, with Kirara thinking the Pokemon looks cool. Afterwards, Vegito then takes a further look at Kirara and notices her haircut, before getting a strange feeling of deja vu, and thinks, "Why am I getting a weird bit of deja vu with seeing Kirara's haircut?" Akari then notices this too, and remembers back to the last time she went to a hair salon, as she starts crying and remembering the repressed memory, with Vegito, Fuyumi, Kota, Mario, and Kirara trying to calm her down. But Fuyumi ends up saying to Vegito that he should go on to school, and she doesn't want him to be late, and that she'll handle things with Akari. But Vegito says, late, mate. I want to be completely sure that Akari is calm before I leave." Fuyumi then points out that he was already late yesterday from what Izuku told her, but Vegito says that was due to circumstances out of his control. Kirara asks Fuyumi if she knows why Akari is crying, as Fuyumi says that Akari had a haircut similar to hers when she was younger, but she wasn't a fan due to Akari liking her hair long. After a few minutes, Fuyumi remembers one of the things that's nearly guaranteed to calm Akari down when she's upset, saying to Vegito, "Vegito, did you by chance bring metal with you?" Although Vegito says that he didn't, Akari manages to get a few words out while she's crying. "Metal's in my backpack." Vegito then opens up Akari's backpack, managing to find the plushie, and hands it to the child, with metal in addition to 5 people all comforting her at once, managing to get Akari calmed down. Vegito then asks his sister if she's good, with Akari saying that she thinks so, with Vegito saying, "Well then, in that case, can you explain to me what this is doing in your backpack?" As Vegito pulls out Akari's Switch in its case. But before Vegito can further question the child on this, Fuyumi makes the point that he can question her on it later, since he'll be late if he doesn't get going. Vegito then thinks about it for a second and agrees, putting the Switch back in Akari's backpack, saying that it better not be a distraction in class today. Although before he leaves, Vegito turns to Kota and says, "Hey Kota, do me a little favor, will ya? Can you just keep an eye on Akari for me today? Since while she has metal, I still want to make sure she's okay." Kota then says, "Yeah, whatever." Vegito turns to leave again, but he feels a tug on his pant leg, with a voice saying, "Are you a UA student, mister?" With Vegito getting down to the child's level and noticing she has mint green hair and 2 pigtails with brown eyes, saying, "Yeah, I am. I'm Vegito Midoriya. What's your name?" With the girl introducing herself as Sora Mori, with Fuyumi saying, "Sora? We should let Vegito get to class. We don't want him to be late, do we?" Vegito then takes his time to slip away so he can get to class on time. Afterwards, Sora then approaches Akari before making fun of her for carrying around her dolly and calling her a crybaby, with Sora heading to her seat, but not before giving Kirara a dirty look for some reason. Afterwards, Fuyumi then says to Metal that she'd love for him to join them in class today. Fuyumi knows the plushie can't talk, she's just playing along to help Akari feel better. From here, we can skip to after lunch, as Aizawa announces that today's Hero Basic Training class will be taking place in an off-campus facility. But before Aizawa can announce where this off-campus facility is, the door is opened up by another teacher, with it being revealed to be Vlad King, the homeroom teacher of Class 1B, as he's followed in by two of his students. The first being a girl with orange hair styled into a side ponytail on the left side of her head, and beside her is a boy with chin-length, messy gray hair, with Vlad introducing the two students as Itsuka Kendo and Tetsu, the class reps of Class 1B. In this timeline, Tetsu ended up receiving more votes than Shota, making him the vice rep instead. Aizawa then invites Vegito and Momo to come up front, so they can get acquainted with our fellow class reps. As Itsuka, after hearing Vegito's voice, says, "Spider Monkey? Is that you?" With Vegito asking how she even knows his gamertag, further questioning if they play games together or something. But Itsuka says, "No, but she played games with my sister lots of times." Vegito then asks who her sister is, with Itsuka revealing that she's his old friend Devil Girl. Afterwards, the class reps introduce themselves, with Vegito and Tetsu hitting it off rather quickly, due to their shared love of fighting games. Aizawa says that both classes will be able to wear whatever they want to the USJ, with most of the students putting on their costumes, except for Izuku, due to his being kinda trashed, Toru, due to her misplacing her gloves and boots, and one of the 1B students, since her costume isn't ready yet, since the designers haven't finished making it be able to fit to the abilities of her quirk. After everyone arrives, Vlad explains they'll all be taking one bus to the USJ, with the classes mingling for a bit, with both Izuku and Momo noticing Vegito looks noticeably worried about something, with the pair deciding to ask him about it, with Momo asking, "Vegito, is everything okay? You look really worried about something." Vegito reassures his friends that it's fine, but Izuku says, "You're worried about Akari, aren't you?" Vegito then asks his brother what makes him say that, but Izuku says, "It's because you're making your 'I'm worried about Akari' face." Momo then asks Izuku about it, and Izuku says that he's known about this trait of Vegito's for a while now, ever since Akari was 2 years old. Flashback time! It was over 4 years ago, and shortly after Akari had turned 2 years old, I decided to go hang out with Vegito at his house, since we hadn't gotten to hang out outside of school for a while. I expected Vegito to answer the door like always, but it was Mrs. Wasei that answered instead, as she told me that Vegito was in his room. And for those wondering, Vegito's original surname is Wasei, and it means made in Japan. After that explanation, I decided to ask Mrs. Wasei why Vegito hadn't been able to hang out in a while, as Mrs. Wasei revealed that the reason why Vegito hadn't been able to hang out is because he'd been busy babysitting Akari while she and Mr. Wasei were at work. After hearing the explanation from Mrs. Wasei, I headed to Vegito's room, where I heard music playing on his PS5, and found Vegito laying on his bed with his hands bandaged up, and Akari laying on top of him while Vegito was stroking her hair. When I asked him about it, Vegito explained that it's something she often likes to do whenever she can't sleep, or overall just likes to spend time with him. Since Vegito told me to try and keep the noise down, since Akari was napping, and he didn't want to wake her, I suggested we should probably go ahead and play some games, as Vegito suggested we play Mortal Kombat 1, one of his favorite fighting games. So I decided to go looking for his copy of the game, when Mrs. Wasei came into the room, asking us if we've seen Akari, since she wasn't in her room and she was supposed to be taking a nap, also saying that she wanted to take Akari to the park. But Vegito ended up pointing to where Akari was laying on him, as Mrs. Wasei ended up picking up Akari, which also woke her up from her nap as she started crying due to not only being woken up, but also removed from her favorite spot. And when that happened, Mrs. Wasei tried her best to calm her down, and Vegito even offered to help, but she turned him down. Afterwards, I decided to ask Mrs. Wasei why Vegito's hands were bandaged up, with Mrs. Wasei saying that from what Vegito told her, Akari threw a tantrum about not wanting to take her nap earlier, and that when she got home, she stumbled upon that, and Vegito gripping his knuckles to the point where he started to draw blood. And that was why his hands were bandaged up. Afterwards, Mrs. Wasei took Akari off to the park, although before we started playing the game, I noticed Vegito looked really worried about something, and so I decided to ask him about it. With Vegito explained that as Akari's brother, he'll naturally always be worried about her to some degree. End of flashback. After hearing this, classes 1A and 1B head to the bus, with Vegito, Momo, Izuku, and Ochako all sitting together on one side in the front section, while the other girl is Itsuka, Tetsu, Tokoyami, and a girl with long indigo hair that goes just past her waist with some pink streaks in it, green eyes, and a tail resembling that of a demon's tail. As Itsuka introduces the other girl as her younger sister, Lily Kendo, although Lily says that her name is actually Lilith, and that Lily is just a nickname her sister gave her when they were kids. Vegito and Lilith then try to get to talking, even if it's kind of awkward since they're both meeting their online friend IRL. Izuku, Itsuka, and Momo decide to try and help the pair break the ice, with even Dark Shadow, Tokoyami's quirk, even coming out to help, with Lilith saying, "Oh, who's this cute little thing?" as Dark Shadow decides to introduce himself to the girl, and also introduce his broody companion, with Tokoyami getting a bit embarrassed at this, telling his shadowy companion to cease this behavior at once. As Vegito keeps trying to say Lilith's name, but failing, with Itsuka asking, Vegito, are you having trouble pronouncing my sister's name? With Izuku revealing that Vegito has had problems with the TH sound since they were kids, adding that while this is definitely a big improvement from when they were kids, the TH sound still stumps him on occasion. Lilith, after hearing this, says that she'd be okay with him calling her Lily if it makes things easier on him. Afterwards, Mineta ends up taking a look at Lilith, and in typical Mineta fashion, finds her to be very attractive, and due to Mineta's poor impulse control, he decides to act on these urges, but before they can, he's dragged away by the ear by Toru, though she decides to ask Vegito why he didn't step in to deal with Mineta, until she sees the very worried look on his face and stops halfway through, instead deciding to ask Momo if she knows why Vegito looks so worried, with Momo explaining that Vegito is worried about his sister, with Toru thinking it's sweet how much Vegito cares about his sister. Afterwards, Momo decides to ask Vegito what Akari looks like, with Vegito pulling up a picture on his phone that he took at her 4th birthday party, where she has cake all over her face, as Momo says, "Aw, she's adorable!" Afterwards, Momo decides to ask Vegito about some stuff from Izuku's story, saying, "Vegito, if you don't mind me asking, why was Akari upset about being with your mother?" With Vegito explained that it was due to Akari being unfamiliar with Emma, although Momo asked why Akari would be unfamiliar with her mother, with Vegito deciding to tell her a bit from his past, saying, "After my mom's maternity leave, she and my dad were barely ever home due to increased villain activity, leaving me to pick up the slack back at home, which involved me basically raising Akari since she was 3 months old." Momo takes this in and is rather concerned, while Ochako is shocked that Mindstorm basically ignored her children, while Lilith isn't really two-faced since she somewhat already knew what was going on, since Vegito did tend to vent about his past sometimes when they were playing games together. Ochako asks Izuku how he's unfazed by this, but Izuku reveals that he's already known about it for over a year at this point. But Ochako asks why he didn't tell anyone else, but Izuku reveals, "Vegito asked me not to, since he's afraid most people won't believe him due to his parents being high-ranking pros." Momo is about to ask Vegito for more information on the matter, but before she can, Aizawa announces they've arrived at the USJ, where from here, events can kinda line back up with canon for a bit, with classes 1A and 1B meeting 13, the space hero, and Ochako revealing that she's enough of her favorite heroes alongside Mindstorm. 13's talk about the USJ goes as canon until an odd portal opens, as a man who looks to be in his early 20s with a prop hand in his face looks in, with an odd bird creature standing beside him, in addition to a man all too familiar to Vegito riding in on a glider, laughing maniacally. Vegito hears this and turns to Shoto saying, Shoto? Is it just me, or does that maniacal laugh sound extremely familiar? With Shoto saying that he remembers that laugh all too well from last Christmas, with the voice connected to the maniacal laugh saying, Shigaraki, you and Nomu can deal with the others. Uzaru Jr. is mine! With Shigaraki saying to Goblin that sounds good to him, since all he wants to do right now is watch the symbol of peace take his last breath. From here, Kurogiri's talk about their plans goes as canon, with Aizawa and Vlad jumping down into the central plaza to fight the villains. But Vegito decides to warn his teacher to watch out for Goblin's tech. Kurogiri then uses his warp gates to try and scatter the 40 students, although 13 manages to use her black hole quirk to save Izuku, Ochako, Ida, Awase, Shiozaki, and Shota. Since we had 20 extra students here, I decided to change up the USJ groups to spice things up a bit, with Vegito being sent careening into the flood zone, but he managed to use his quirk to catch himself mid-air, as he also sees Momo about to fall into the water with some fish villains about to attack her. But luckily, Vegito manages to swoop in at the last second and catches her, with Momo thanking Vegito for the save, with the pair deciding to head for the boat, with the pair also seeing Lilith and decide to help her, with Vegito catching her on his back to prevent her from falling into the water. Lilith then says, "Thanks for the save, Jeets," with the trio heading over to the boat, as one of the jobber villains remarks, "So, that's her kid, huh?" With another remarking that he thought Lady Nagant's daughter was still at the orphanage. Momo then says, "Lilith does look an awful lot like Lady Nagant." Meanwhile, over in the landslide zone, Jiro is asking herself who Lady Nagant is. When they arrive, they already see Bakugo is there, with Tsuyu soon arriving after with Monoma wrapped in her tongue. Tsuyu then says that they should try and strategize a way to deal with these villains, but Bakugo shuts this down by saying, "You can do whatever the hell you want. I'm going after the boss villain, that warp bastard." Vegito decides to ask Momo if she can use her quirk to make something to fight the villains with. Although Momo asks, couldn't Vegito just use his Keyblade? But Vegito makes a rather salient point, saying they don't know what types of quirks these villains have, so he wants something as a contingency plan, and so Momo ends up making Vegito a staff, and something to let him store it on his back. Afterwards, Monoma goes to offer Bakugo a handshake, with Bakugo being extremely reluctant until Vegito says in the same voice used when talking to Akari, "Katsuki, if you don't accept the handshake, then it'll take us longer to beat the villains, and the other villains can use their warp gate to escape." With this game, Bakugo to reluctantly accept the handshake, allowing Monoma's quirk to activate and copy Bakugo's explosion quirk. Afterwards, Momo asks Vegito how he was able to convince Bakugo, with the young Saiyan revealing, "When you've had to raise a kid since she was 3 months old, you tend to pick up a few tricks. So, I apply what I learned from raising Akari to the current situation." Vegito then bursts his aura and charges off the boat towards the villains, with the dust from this causing Lilith to sneeze, which activates her quirk, causing her hair to turn from its normal vibrant color to jet black, her skin to turn red, her feet turn into hooves, she grows a pair of horns, and her eyes turn the same shade of yellow as Vegito's Ikari form. Lilith's quirk is called Devil Trigger, and whenever Lilith sneezes, she transforms into a demon. Vegito then notices a fish villain and decides to take his new weapon out for a test drive, pulling his new staff out of the sheath and cracking the villain over the head with it, which isn't enough to subdue the villain. But Vegito decides to see if he can try funneling his ki into the staff to make it stronger in some way, shape, or form, which it does, with the ki causing the staff to extend, allowing him to subdue the villains more quickly, thanks to the newfound abilities of his new weapon. As Vegito thinks to himself, I remember a snap similar to this one from an anime I watched with Dad before Akari was born, with Vegito deciding to name his new weapon the Power Pole, as a subtle tribute to his dad. After taking out quite a few jobber villains using his new Power Pole, Vegito meets back up on the boat with the rest of his group, trying to plan their next move, until Vegito hears the same maniacal laugh he heard when the villains arrived at the USJ, with Vegito turning around and seeing Goblin on his glider with his arms folded, saying, "Well, looks like I found you, Uzaru Jr." Vegito was shocked that Goblin is present with the USJ with his group of villains, asking him as such. Momo then asks, "Vegito, do you know this villain?" Vegito then explains that Goblin is his dad's self-proclaimed greatest enemy, and that he fought him last Christmas with Shoto and Uncle Enji. Momo questions this, asking if Vegito means that Endeavor is his uncle, but Vegito explains, "Close. He's actually my godfather. I just call him Uncle Enji out of respect." Momo takes this in and decides to just ask Vegito about it later, with Lilith pulling out 2 pistols, as Momo decides to make Lilith some ammo for her pistols using her quirk, before also using her quirk to make a cannon to fight Goblin with Tsuyu designed to assist Momo with the cannon, while Vegito, Bakugo, and Monoma all charge at Goblin. Vegito decides to fight Goblin in base first, mainly as a way to pace himself, but also to test how far he's come with his training, igniting his Keyblade to go at Goblin, while Bakugo and Monoma try hitting Goblin with explosions, although Goblin manages to use his glider to dodge, and uses hyper-intelligence quirk to try and make a strategy here, deeming Monoma as the weakest link of the group, as Goblin decides to use his pumpkin bombs to try and kill Monoma. But Vegito notices this and pulls out the Power Pole to try and defend Monoma, with Vegito managing to bat away a few of Goblin's pumpkin bombs using the Power Pole. But this ends up sending the bombs to the nearby fire and downpour zones, with the bombs detonating on the roofs of the domes, causing the students inside the domes to have to not only fight villains, but also dodge debris from the crumbling roofs, with the groups deciding to do the smart move of trying to throw debris at the villains, which manages to subdue most of the villains. Meanwhile, after a few minutes, Monoma starts to fall after the time limit of his quirk runs out, with Vegito noticing this before batting away Goblin with a roundhouse kick, before grabbing his Power Pole and yelling out, "Power Pole extend!" sending his new staff towards Monoma, with the blonde boy grabbing onto the weapon. Vegito then retracts the Power Pole, pulling Monoma towards him and letting Monoma touch him to copy his quirk, to let Monoma get back into the fight. Afterwards, Vegito stores the Power Pole on his back, as Goblin decides to open up a new hatch on his glider, and pulls out another bomb. But however, this one is cylindrical in shape, resembling a squash, with Goblin introducing it as his latest creation, further adding that the abilities of his new toy were inspired by the quirk of someone he knows, before he tosses it at Vegito. Vegito braces for impact, thinking it's just a pumpkin bomb in a different shape, and while the squash bomb does explode, it doesn't do any physical damage to him, to Vegito's surprise. Vegito then says, "Hey Goblin, I think your new toy might be a dud," as we cut to Monoma, who is also hit with the mysterious smoke, as for some reason, Monoma starts seeing his biggest fear in the mysterious smoke, being completely forgotten by his friends and classmates, even by Vlad King, his homeroom teacher, with Monoma screaming out for his friends, classmates, and teacher to not forget about him. Vegito hears about this and decides to ask Monoma if he's okay, as Goblin reveals that Monoma must be experiencing the effects of his squash bomb. But Vegito says, "What, that dud?" But Goblin reveals that it's no dud, before explaining what it does to the young Saiyan, by saying those who get hit by the gas see their worst fears manifest into reality. Afterwards, Bakugo gets hit with Goblin's fear gas, as he starts to see a vision of a potential future for the hero billboard charts, where he sees Izuku being crowned the #1 hero instead of him. This is still Season 1 Bakugo, so I think this would make sense for something he'd see in the fear gas. Lilith gets hit with it next, as she sees herself as a young woman in a similar situation as her bio mom, calling out to her best friend Shiozaki, but Shiozaki ends up calling her an irresponsible sinner. Tsuyu gets hit, but she sees herself as an actual frog, being hunted and eaten. Lastly, Momo gets hit, as she sees in the gas, for some reason, visions of Vegito getting hurt and taking what looks to be a pumpkin bomb to his chest. Momo thinks to herself, why am I seeing Vegito in this gas? Why is my greatest fear Vegito getting hurt? Could I possibly see Vegito as more than just my friend and fellow class rep? Momo then sees another vision of herself, Vegito, and Akari at what looks to be a parent-teacher conference, with Akari kicking her legs back and forth while looking at her with a big smile on her face, with Momo saying to herself, wait, that Akari? Why am I at what looks to be a parent-teacher conference with her? And why is her arm broken? Lilith decides to see if she can break out of seeing her illusion by pulling out one of her pistols and literally shooting herself in the foot. And while it really hurts, luckily due to her feet being hooves, it wouldn't hurt as bad as it would if she did this in her base form. And luckily for the demon girl, this manages to break her out of the illusion, with Lilith communicating this information to the others, as Tsuyu bites her tongue to break out of hers. Bakugo ends up breaking one of his fingers to get out of his, while Monoma's time limit runs out, causing Tsuyu to catch him with her tongue before he gets Gwen Stacy'd, with this snapping him out of his illusion. Now we transition over to Vegito, as he's looking around and trying to escape from the gas, as he hears a voice all too familiar to him saying, "Hey son!" with Vegito turning around to see two people from his past that he thought he'd never see again, being the former #3 and #7 heroes, Uzaru and Mindstorm, aka his biological parents, Kaito and Emma Wasei. After hearing the voice of his father, Vegito fully realizes what this gas does, as he decides to ask, "Hey Goblin, I've got a hypothetical question for you. How much punishment can these illusions of yours take?" With Kaito asking his son in a rather concerned voice, Vegito? Why would you want to know that?" Goblin then asks why he wants to punch an illusion, as Vegito says, "Let's just say, I've got some shit to work through." Goblin says in that case, he thinks they have about 30% of the strength and durability of the originals. Vegito takes this in as a rather devious looking smirk appears on his face, with Kaito and Emma both looking rather concerned at seeing his look on their son's face. Emma then decides to ask her son, "Vegito, is everything alright? What's with that smirk on your face?" Vegito powers up to Akari, as you just hear an audible snapping sound in Vegito's mind, as he charges up a Cobra Blast and fires it while yelling, "It's time for some long overdue payback!" with the Cobra Blast barreling towards Kaito and managing to hit its mark. Meanwhile, outside of the gas, Tsuyu asks Lilith what that power surge was from Vegito, with Lilith saying, "I was wondering when he'd finally snap. He's been holding this in for years." Bakugo then asks, what could Vegito be facing in there to warrant that? With Lilith saying, based on his reaction, I'd say his parents. With Bakugo asking what Uzaru and Mindstorm did to get that kind of reaction out of Vegito. With Lilith revealing that they prioritize hero work over their children, leading to Vegito having to raise Akari since she was 3 months old, to the point where Akari genuinely thinks Vegito is her father. Tsuyu is horrified at this news, saying, "That's parentification!" With Lilith saying, "I didn't know there was a word for it, but I'm one of only a handful of people that he's told this to." Bakugo then says that obviously Izuku would be another one, while Monoma says that if Vegito's told her this, then that means he must really trust her. Lilith then reveals that Vegito would sometimes vent in the lobbies of various games they played online together back in middle school, with Tsuyu saying she hopes Vegito's going to be okay in there, especially as he's facing two people that put him through so much pain. Afterwards, Vegito pulls out the power pole and says to the illusions of his parents, "You will reap everything you've sown! Kaito and Emma will say, it's time I gave you two exactly what you deserve!" Charging right at the illusions of his parents, with Vegito about to deck Emma with a power pole. Although Emma uses her quirk to move out of the way, Vegito then yells out, "Power pole extend!" with this allowing the attack to hit its mark, before then letting Vegito spin the power pole and start cracking him over the head with it repeatedly, with Kaito commenting that this staff of Vegito's functions rather similar to the power pole. Afterwards, Emma rubs where Vegito struck her with the power pole, before asking her son what that was all about, with Vegito saying, "You know what you did! To me and to Akari!" Meanwhile, Akari ends up letting out a sneeze, as Kirara hopes that Akari isn't catching a cold, although the girl tells her new friend not to worry and that it's only a sneeze. Back with Vegito, Kaito, and Emma, Vegito decides to introduce his new toy, saying, "Mom, Dad, this is my power pole. Now, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to talk, and you two are going to listen. And if either of you interrupt or try to defend your actions here, then the parent that does will get hit with the power pole." Vegito then starts telling his parents of all the times they've wronged either him or Akari, starting with his 9th birthday, revealing that they basically blew him off and left him to celebrate his birthday all alone with no one but his 6-month-old sister to keep him company. As Vegito outright starts to tear up at remembering the memory, Kaito and Emma take this in with Kaito saying, "Vegito, we're sorry we blew you off on your birthday, but you gotta understand, we had our hero work to deal with." But all this does is snap Vegito out of his funk, and further fan the flames of his anger, with Vegito spinning the power pole in his hands before whacking Kaito on the head with it, with this getting Kaito to ask his son what that staff of his is made of. But Vegito says, "I don't know. I never asked Momo what it was made of." Emma takes this in and says that Momo sounds like a girl's name, with Vegito explaining that Momo is one of his classmates, blushing a bit as he says this, with Emma noticing this and saying, "Well, Vegito, if she's just your classmate, then why just start blushing when you mentioned her?" With Vegito saying, "Until I know how she feels, I'd rather not dwell on that." After taking a second to collect himself, he starts talking about the last time Akari wet the bed, and how one of them should have been home to help her. Further adding that him being forced to take care of Akari cost him his rank-up match, before asking if they have any idea how it feels to have a 3-year-old who wet herself climbing on them, before adding, "It ain't pleasant." This also triggers Vegito to remember back to when this happened. Flashback. It was shortly before my 12th birthday, and I had already put Akari in the bed, and so decided to hop on Marvel Rivals to see if I could try and rank up. And during said match, where I would have ranked up if I had won, Akari ended up wetting the bed, which I don't blame her for, since I know that was something out of her control. I was performing a bit worse than I normally would, which caused me to end up saying a word that I really shouldn't have, and unbeknownst to me at the time, Akari had heard it. Afterwards, Akari ended up climbing on top of me as she often does to get my attention, which worked, and while taking care of Akari, this ended up leaving my team to fight a 5v6 without their Spider-Man, which ended up costing me the match and my rank up. And after getting the sheets off her bed to get them clean, I ended up giving her a bath, where she ended up asking me what that word I said is, which afterwards I told her that she should never repeat that word. End of flashback. Kaito and Emma are shocked at the fact that it was actually Vegito who taught her that word, although Vegito says that he didn't know she was in the room when he said it. Afterwards, Emma ends up defending their actions here by saying, Vegito, it's just a game. With this earning Emma another whack from the power pole. As Vegito yells out, "It's almost like you think villains are more important to you than your own children. Maybe you think it would have been better if you two lived and that villain had killed me and Akari instead." Meanwhile, with the other members of the Flood group, they all hear everything that went down, with Tsuyu saying that's messed up, while Lilith ends up saying, "I knew it was bad, but I didn't think it was that bad." Bako then adds that's messed up, while Momo starts tearing up while inside her illusion saying, "Poor Vegito." Meanwhile, in the landslide zone, we see Jiro with an extremely shocked look on her face. Then she's hearing everything in the flood zone due to her absurdly sensitive hearing, with Kaminari asking her if she's okay. Although the girl says, "I think I overheard something that I really shouldn't have." Back with Vegito, Kaito, and Emma. Emma is horrified to hear this come out of her son's mouth, asking how he could possibly think that. While Kaito asks his son, "Do you really think so little of us? That you think we'd be happy to watch our children die?" Although Vegito counters back with, "Neither of you give me reason to think otherwise since Akari was still in diapers. It's almost like neither of you ever cared about her." Kaito and him are horrified to hear this come from their son and try to convince him otherwise. But Vegito shuts this down by saying, "If either of you actually cared about her, then you would have been there for her instead of leaving me to raise her." As afterwards, another figure shows up in the gas. This time, next to Vegito, with it being revealed to be Akari. Saying, "Hi, Daddy." Although Kaito ends up saying that he's over here, but Akari says, "I'm not talking to you, Kaito, I'm talking to my daddy." With Vegito getting on Akari's level and asking why she's here, with the child saying, "Daddy, if you don't stop Goblin soon, he might come after me next." With Vegito responding with, "You're right, sweetie, but first, we gotta deal with these two." Gesturing over to Kaito and Emma. Emma then says to her daughter, "Akari, sweetie, I think you got confused again. Vegito's your brother, not your dad." Although Akari says, "No, I didn't. He's my daddy." Vegito then tells Akari to climb on his back, with the child doing as told, as she notices a staff on his back and decides to ask her dad about it, saying, "Daddy, what's this stick thing on your back?" As Vegito explains that it's called the power pole, and that his friend and classmate Momo made for him using her quirk. Akari then says, "She sounds nice." With Vegito adding, "Yeah, she is nice," before turning to Kaito and asking his dad, "Tell me, Dad, do you remember back to the last Father's Day before yours and Mom's demise? And how she gave me a Father's Day card and Best Dad mug instead of you?" With Kaito saying that now that he mentioned it, he does. Before adding that he just thought Akari confused Vegito for himself. But Vegito corrects his dad on this by saying, "Akari wasn't confused. The kid genuinely believes that I am the parent, because you two couldn't be bothered to be there for your kids." Kaito and Emma take this in as Emma says, "Where did we go wrong?" Although Vegito snaps back with, "Probably where he left an 8-year-old to basically raise an infant on his own." Kaito and Emma are saddened to hear this come from their son, but they decide not to say anything about it, with Emma taking a further look at Akari and saying, "Akari, now that I'm looking at you more, I think you really need a haircut. I can't imagine you be able to take care of it properly when it's that long." And hearing this line from Emma makes Akari remember back to the last time she, Vegito, and Emma went to a hair salon, and she starts crying, with Vegito spinning the child around and wrapping her in his arms. But this just breaking Kaito's heart, while Emma just thinks Akari is overreacting. But at this point, she's smart enough not to vocalize it. Meanwhile, over with Lilith, she's horrified at what she's hearing as she says, "Ooh, looks like Emma just pressed the Akari button. She shouldn't have done that." Back with the Wasei family, Vegito is currently comforting Akari, while Kaito ends up chastising his wife on her earlier comment, saying, "Emma, how could you say that to Akari? Don't you remember what happened the last time you took Akari to get a haircut?" After a couple minutes, Vegito manages to get Akari calm for placing the child back on his back, as he starts to verbally rip into Emma, remembering back to all the hard work he put into planning Akari's 4th birthday party, saying to Emma, "I spent weeks making decorations and learning how to bake just so I can give Akari a proper birthday party, and then you show up taking all the credit when you didn't even know what flavor the cake was." Emma then tried to say that she knew what flavor it was, but Kaito shuts this down by saying, "You thought it was orange when it was clearly peach." Peaches are Akari's favorite fruit, which is why Vegito made her a peach-flavored cake for her birthday. Afterwards, Vegito then reveals that Kaito and Emma basically forced Akari to grow up without a mom, due to them rarely ever being around for her. This revelation makes Akari sad, as she ends up saying, "Daddy, you know how I feel about not having a mommy." Vegito reassures Akari by saying, "Don't worry, sweetie. I'm going to do everything I can to give you a mom. When that'll happen, I'm not sure right now, but I'll think of something." Afterwards, Vegito then cups his hands together like he does for the Justice Cannon and starts charging it up. But however, this Justice Cannon is different, as it takes on a magenta color rather than its usual red. Emma then tries to approach Vegito and Akari, and then tries to stroke a piece of Akari's hair, with Akari protecting her hair from Emma and trying her best to get away from her. Vegito notices this and starts chastising his mother by saying, "Seriously, Mom? After causing Akari's hair problems, you're going to go after her hair again?" Although Emma tries to say she kept her hair at shoulder length when she was Akari's age, however, Vegito points out that this isn't exactly helping her case, and saying, "After what you did to it, Akari still has trust issues involving her hair to this day." Emma has nothing to say at this, with Vegito saying in that case, he'll refresh her memory. Flashback. It was the Sunday before Akari turned 3. I was chilling in my room, playing some Super Mario Sunshine. I was about to start fighting Bowser at the end of the game. But before I could start the fight, I heard a loud yelp of pain, and then the sound of Akari's crying, as I paused the game and decided to go check it out. Only to find Akari crying on the couch, and your hands on her hair. When I asked you what happened, you just said that you wanted to do Akari's hair and she started crying. Then you decided to ask me if Akari had been taking care of her hair, since you apparently found some knots in it. I then explained how I've been working with her on taking care of her hair, and revealed that she was crying from having her hair pulled. Not because she had some knots in it, but because she doesn't like having her hair pulled. Afterwards, I ended up taking Akari out to my room to get her calmed down while you made breakfast, which luckily I had stocked up my mini fridge with some apple juice before this happened. So I ended up giving Akari a bottle of apple juice from my fridge to help calm her down. Later, when we arrived at the hair salon for yours and Akari's hair appointments, I decided to take Akari over to the chair to avoid any more issues, since you already upset her once involving her hair earlier. And I encouraged Akari to tell the stylist what she wanted for her hair. But for some reason that I still can't figure out, you decided to cut in and completely override what Akari wanted for her hair. After I got Akari in a chair, the stylist started out the haircut, and when Akari's ponytail was chopped off, her crying just completely broke my heart. After some time, the stylist showed you, Akari, and I the finished product, and Akari just started crying even harder from seeing her new look. But for some reason, you thought it was a good idea to try telling her not to be so dramatic over just a haircut, which caused her to start having a full-on meltdown over the whole thing. And while I was trying to do the right thing and comfort her through it, you, for some reason I still don't understand, thought it was a smart idea to try yelling at her, which just made things worse. So I decided to go ahead and take Akari and get her out of there. And when you tried offering to help with Akari, I asked that you don't think you'd done enough damage already. As I decided to try taking her to the Pokemon Center to help her feel better. And on the way, I called up for Yumi, asking her about some quick hair growth methods, in which she told me about the scalp massages that you and Dad saw me giving her later that day. After we arrived at the Pokemon Center, I let Akari down from my arms and went with her to let her pick out a plushie to help her feel better. Since she loves plushies, with Akari picking out a plushie of Infernape, one of her current favorite Pokemon, because it reminded her of me. End of flashback. After telling the story, Emma just has nothing to say at this information, as Vegito thrusts his hands forward, yelling out, "Justice Cannon!" with Emma taking the attack at point blank range, as she is atomized by the blast. And before the blast reaches Kaito, he sees a bunch of people behind Vegito and Akari, being Izuku, Inko, Shoto, Fuyumi, Ochako, Momo, Enji, and Lilith, as Kaito then gets atomized by the blast. Being glad to see so many people in the corner of his children, Vegito finally snaps out of his illusion, with Akari saying, "Bye, Daddy," with Vegito saying that he'll see her after school, as the illusion of his daughter fades away. Afterwards, Vegito hears Momo crying inside her illusion, but also hears a faint crying sound coming from somewhere. But he decides to ignore that for now and starts heading towards Momo, asking her what the matter is. But she's currently crying too hard to be understood at the moment, with Vegito thinking, it's just like Akari was this morning but at her school, before wrapping his arms around Momo in a hug to try and comfort her. Lilith ends up seeing this and thinks it's cute, while Suyu points out it's Vegito's paternal instincts in action, with Bakugo saying, "Stupid monkey, we still have Goblin to deal with. You can cover Minecraft creative mode later." While Lilith says, "Oh, come on, Bakugo, it's cute." Bakugo and Lilith end up having a whole back and forth, with Lilith's personality exciting Bakugo a bit, and leaving him a bit more open-minded about having a partner. Meanwhile, Momo ends up saying, "What's wrong, Short Fuse? Are you jealous that the monkey wants milk jugs instead of you?" As Momo starts laughing while Bakugo is absolutely livid at Momo's comments, and is about to explode him. But Lilith ends up taking a page from her sister's playbook and knocks out Monoma, lifting him over her shoulder like a beast and carrying him off, while trying not to bust a gut laughing at Monoma's comment, while Suyu is trying her best to calm Bakugo down, although she only manages to calm him down enough to get him to redirect his anger at the villains. Meanwhile, Vegito is rather pissed at Monoma's comment, seeing his nickname for Momo is just reducing her to her chest. But before he can enact his own swift justice on Monoma for it, he hears the familiar sound of one of Goblin's pumpkin bombs being activated, as Goblin decides to take advantage of Vegito being distracted, and throws it at Momo, with Vegito noticing this and yelling out at the top of his lungs, "My Momo!" letting go of Momo to jump in front of her, taking the pumpkin bomb that was meant for her right to the chest, with this also snapping Momo out of her illusion at the same time, meaning she sees what she saw in her illusion come to fruition, as the top part of Vegito's costume is almost completely destroyed, in addition to causing Vegito to lose his left nipple, while also leaving a rather nasty gash in his chest that's smoking and sizzling like freshly cooked bacon. The impact of the blast also dislocates Vegito's left shoulder. Unbeknownst to Vegito, his emotional outburst was heard across the entire USJ, and All Might arrives just in time to hear it as well, with Mina over in the Ruin Zone saying, "I knew it!" while Toru briefly turns visible for a second and joins Mina in cheering, as everyone there is shocked to see Toru turn visible for a brief second, with Mina saying, "You're really cute," while Toru is rather surprised, saying, "Huh, so that's what I look like," while Mineta says, "I wonder what we'd be seeing if you hadn't misplaced your hero outfit." Meanwhile, Itsuka over in the mountain zone says they're throwing up in her mouth a bit. A woman isn't property. While Momo ends up turning a deep shade of red, similar to her costume, saying, "Here's Momo," before Vegito falls back down to base, with Momo managing to catch the young Saiyan. Momo sets Vegito down with the other members of the Flood group, running over to check on him, aside from Bakugo, who is using this as the opportunity to go after Kurogiri to cut out the League's escape route, and Monoma, who is currently knocked out. Lilith runs over to Vegito and asks if he's okay, with Tsuyu deciding to try and comfort the now sobbing Momo, as Lilith says, "Vegito, you're bleeding!" "'Tis but a scratch." "A scratch? You're missing a nipple, your left shoulder's dislocated, and there's a gash in your chest with smoking and sizzling like freshly cooked bacon!" "No, there isn't." "Then what's that?" Pointing to all of Vegito's injuries, but Vegito says that he's had worse. Lilith then asks for an example, with Vegito telling her about the collapsed lung he got last Christmas. And when Lilith asks how that happened, Vegito reveals he was tackled through a wall by a rhino heteromorph. Goblin then flies over his glider, asking if he meets Monoceros, with Vegito saying, "Oh yeah, I remember him." Goblin then says that he thought Vegito would give him more of a challenge than last time, adding that maybe that daughter of his will give him more of a fight, adding that he just had an even better idea. He'll make Vegito watch as his precious baby girl takes her final breath, with this making Vegito snap, powering back up into Akari, as he lets out a primal roar, similar to that of Godzilla, before saying, "If you even think of harming my baby girl, I'll rip your guts out!" As this is heard across the entire USJ, with Shoto recognizing that Goblin just pressed the Akari button, and nervously shuddering remembering what happened the last time it was pressed, with Itsuka deciding to ask him about it. Although Shoto says, "Let's just say, I will never forget last Christmas." Over with Izuku, Ochako notices Izuku also shuddering from remembering what happened the last time the Akari button was pressed, and decides to ask him about it, and who was the one who pressed it the last time, with Izuku revealing Todoroki was the one who pressed it the last time when he made her cry and her telling her Santa Claus isn't real. Ochako was shocked to learn that Shoto's warning about never making Akari cry came from personal experience, and is about to ask Izuku what Vegito did to Shoto when he pressed the button, but Izuku ends up saying that he'll tell her later, adding that All Might needs some help. Back over at the Flood Zone, Vegito charges right at Goblin, firing a manic burst of punches from his good arm, kicks from his legs, and some ki attacks, before igniting his Keyblade and trying to take out his glider. But Goblin ends up dodging the swipes from his Keyblade and decides to leave the Flood Zone, which causes Vegito to fly after him in a berserk-like state. Afterwards, Monoma asks Lilith about what Vegito said, asking, if Vegito has a kid, then who's the mom? But Lilith says that biologically, Akari is Vegito's sister, which confuses Monoma, leading to him asking if Akari is his sister, then why Vegito call her his baby girl? With Lilith saying, because he basically raised her when she was 3 months old. Tsuyu then says that since Goblin left the Flood Zone, they should leave before he comes back, with Lilith grabbing the power pole Vegito left behind, before Tsuyu wraps Momo and Lilith in her tongue, before carrying Monoma in her arms, letting them get out of the Flood Zone. After getting to safety, Ochako runs over and sees Lilith, Tsuyu, Monoma, and the borderline catatonic Momo, with Ochako asking if Momo is okay, although the girl is currently unresponsive. Now Lilith reveals that she's been like that ever since Vegito took that bomb to the chest. Back over with Vegito and Goblin, the pair arrive in the fire zone, where they continue fighting until the pair going to Sero and Shishida, with Shishida telling Sero that he'll stall for time, while he needs to help Vegito with that arm. Sero then says to Vegito, "Hold on, before you get back to fighting, at least let me tape your arm down, so it isn't flailing all over the place." With Shishida adding that Goblin may be able to use a dislocated shoulder against him, and could potentially rip his arm clean off. With this getting Vegito to agree to having his arm taped down to his stomach by Sero. Afterwards, Vegito gets back into the fight, now with his dislocated shoulder going all over the place. After some more fighting, Goblin leaves the fire zone and heads over to the mountain zone, with Vegito going right after him, trying to use his Keyblade to fight Goblin some more. During this, Itsuka sniffs the air and asks, "Does anyone else smell bacon?" With Tokoyami saying that it looks like something's dripping blood. As Itsuka says that now that he mentions it, she sees it too, but her wondering where it could be. Shoto then says that he thinks it's Vegito, with Itsuka saying that it looks like it's coming in fast, and that he looks furious. Vegito and Goblin land in the mountain zone, with Shoto trying to use his flames to blast Goblin, while Vegito ends up knocking Goblin off his glider for a bit, with Goblin trying to punch the Saiyan, but Vegito blocks the attack before grabbing Goblin by the throat with his good arm, before saying, "So if you can explain to me in one sentence why you thought threatening my daughter was a good idea, I might just let you go." Goblin wasn't able to get any words out due to being choked, with Vegito saying, "Yeah, see, I don't get it either." Goblin tries calling his glider back to stab Vegito in the back with it, but Shoto ends up hitting the glider with a blast of fire, damaging the glider a bit and causing some of the circuitry to be exposed. However, this momentary distraction lets Goblin get out of Vegito's grasp and head off to the landslide zone, as Vegito is about to fly off after him, but Shoto stops him, using his ice to give Vegito some temporary ice armor, which also has the side effect of cooling down Vegito's chest. Afterwards, Vegito flies off after Goblin and into the landslide zone, with Shoto deciding to go help All Might deal with the villains. After a few seconds, Vegito arrives at the landslide zone, seeing that Kaminari is currently trying to fight Goblin using his electricity, although currently it's missing its mark, since Kaminari can't really control his electricity at long range. Vegito charges up a Cobra Blast in his good hand and flies at Goblin and fires it, with the Cobra Blast managing to act as a perfect lightning rod for Kaminari's electricity, inadvertently combining the two into an improvised combo move called the Cobra Shocker. As this new move manages to hit the opening on Goblin's glider that Shoto's earlier flame attack made, causing Goblin's glider to short circuit and go haywire, with Goblin crashing straight into Shigaraki. Vegito tries to fly back over to where Momo is, but before he can get there, he drops back down to base and falls unconscious while flying over the ruined zone, falling toward Mina and knocking her down like a set of bowling pins, with Vegito's ice armor shattering on impact and melting on Mina. And due to Vegito and Goblin both being physically out of commission for the rest of the fight, the rest of the USJ can pretty much play out as canon. However, the Nomu fight does have some changes, so I'll go and cover those. The first is that Izuku, Bakugo, and Shoto are all stronger than their canon counterparts, with Izuku having 5% full cowling that he can use, in addition to Shoto using his flames earlier. So when Nomu gets his arm and leg frozen by Shoto, he's able to use his flames to cauterize Nomu's wounds before they can regenerate, meaning Nomu is down an arm and a leg for the rest of the fight, which allows All Might to defeat the Nomu without using too much power, meaning All Might isn't as injured as his canon counterpart. And thanks to Izuku having 5% full cowling, his legs and finger aren't injured here, meaning he gets out of the USJ physically unscathed, Back over with Vegito. The remains of his temporary ice armor have melted on Mina, with the girl saying, "Vegito, why did you have Todoroki's ice on you?" Our pony points out that Vegito can't answer her, since he's unconscious and based on his injury, he might be dead, as Toru suggests they check for a pulse, with Mineta doing so, confirming it's faint, but there. Oni then says that they need to get Vegito medical attention quickly, but Mina asks how they're going to do that, as Toru says that if Kirishima was here, they could have asked him to carry Vegito, with Pony saying that it won't be easy, but they could use her quirk to get Vegito to the entrance. Pony fires off some of her horns as Mina and Toru place Vegito's body on the horns, and they head off to the entrance. After a couple minutes, the Ruins group, with Vegito in tow, arrive at the entrance as Shiozaki uses her vine quirk to reach and safely grab him, wrapping his limbs up in her vines and placing him down on the ground. As Mina, Tsuyu, Ochako, and Toru all grab Vegito's body and bring him over to Momo, where they use her lap as a makeshift pillow, as Shiozaki releases Vegito from her vines. Mia then looks at the unconscious Vegito and says, "I wonder what Vegito's dreaming about in there." We transition over to a dark room, decorated like Vegito's old bedroom from when before Kaito and Eva were murdered, as Vegito sees two familiar figures, with one of them crying, while the other is comforting the crying one sitting on his old bed. As Vegito asks, "Mom? Dad? What are you two doing here?" As Emma explains while crying that they're in his subconscious, as Kaito says, "Vegito, I failed both you and Akari as a father. I'm sorry." Although Vegito says, "It wasn't just you that failed Akari and I, Dad. Mom failed us too. And unfortunately for you both, the damage is already done, and you can't change the past." As Emma also apologizes to her son through tears, saying, "I'm sorry I was such a terrible mother." Although Vegito says, "I just can't in good conscience forgive you both for your actions towards Akari and I." Kaito and Emma are saddened to hear this from their son, but understand his decision. Afterwards, Vegito then declares to his parents, "At this point, I am Akari's real father, and I will continue to fill that role for her. Since you two already forced her to go through life functionally without a mother, and she doesn't deserve to go through life without a father as well." Kaito and Emma are saddened and defeated at this remark, but ultimately accept his declaration, with Kaito saying, "In that case, Vegito, go be the father to Akari that I couldn't be." With Emma also saying through tears, "If you ever need to talk to us, we'll be in your subconscious, watching over you and Akari both." With Kaito finishing with, "Now go, Vegito, your daughter needs you." While Vegito's chat with his parents is happening, Lilith makes the plan to pop Vegito's shoulder back into place, saying, "Alright, I'll keep pressure on his chest. Uraraka, you keep his good arm still. Sue, Hagakure, you two are in charge of his legs. Ashido, you pop his shoulder back in. Yagirozu, try to keep Vegito calm when you can." As Mia says, "Okay, Vegito, this is gonna hurt like hell. Ready? 3! As Mia starts trying to pop Vegito's shoulder back into place, while Tsuyu points out, "These are Velcro shoes Vegito's wearing." Although Toru was wondering why Vegito's wearing Velcro shoes, as Mina says they can ask him about that later, with Mina popping Vegito's shoulder back into place, as this causes Vegito to wake up from his chat with his parents due to the searing pain in his left arm, with Vegito saying in a strained voice, "Yow! What's with this searing pain in my left arm?" Momo then speaks clearly for the first time since she saw Vegito take the bomb to his chest, saying, "Vegito, you're alive!" Just then, Ida arrives back at the USJ with the backup of the UA teachers, with Ida announcing, "I have returned with reinforcements!" Before Ida notices the injured Vegito, asking if he's alright, with Vegito saying that he's been better, with Midnight looking at the scene saying, "Nice pillow," with Momo blushing a bit at this and saying, "Well, we had to use something to help Vegito here." Recovery Girl then heads over and looks at his injury, saying, "Oh my! What happened to you, Sonny?" As Lilith decides to tell the nurse what happened, saying, When the League of Villains attacked earlier, Jeets had to fight Goblin, a villain that he fought with Shoto and Endeavor last Christmas. He's also apparently Uzaru's self-proclaimed greatest villain, with Recover Golden asking how Vegito got his chest all messed up there, as Lilith adds, well, that was due to Jeets taking one of Goblin's pumpkin bombs to his chest for Yagirozu. Goblin also ended up hitting us with a new bomb of his that caused our worst fears to manifest into reality, in which Jeets ended up getting to have a very satisfying for him crash out. Recovery Girl then asked what this crash out could have been at, with Lilith saying, his bio-parents. Although Midnight asked what his bio-parents did to warrant that kind of response out of their son, with Vegito deciding to tell Midnight everything, saying, they left me all alone to raise my infant sister. I was 8 when it happened, and said sister just started first grade a few days ago. As Midnight is just visibly upset and disgusted at hearing this, saying, that's horrible! With Vegito saying that he thinks he did a pretty good job raising Akari. Although Midnight says, not that. I was talking about your parents' actions. I mean, I'm a single mother, and even I'm more of an attentive parent than they were. Vegito hears this and asks, wait, so that kid I saw in Recovery Girl's office the other day was yours, Miss Midnight? Midnight then says, Mikage is my daughter, and I would do anything for her. Vegito then says that he's the same way with Akari, and that she may not be his kid biologically, but she's still his daughter. Afterwards, events line back up with Canon for a bit, although All Might is less injured than his Canon itself, and Izuku's physically unscathed with the League of Villains, minus Nomu and the Jobber villains, retreating, as Izuku finally meets back up with Vegito and the rest of the students, as he sees his brother's injuries and is horrified at the sight. Ochako then asks Izuku, hey Deku, you never did tell me what Vegito did to Todoroki when he pressed the Akari button, with Momo asking about it. And Izuku tells Momo that Shoto made Akari cry when he told her Santa Claus isn't real. Although Momo says, of course Santa Claus is real, he's my grandpa. Ochako asks Izuku what Vegito did to Shoto, with Izuku revealing what went down last Christmas, with Shoto nervously shuddering and remembering the events. Afterwards, Recovery Girl takes Vegito to her office, with Momo going with them, refusing to leave his side due to the guilt she feels for Vegito's almost death. Meanwhile, in Recovery Girl's office, Momo stays with Vegito, while Recovery Girl is treating his injuries, as the pair also find Izuku and All Might, surprisingly to Momo in a much skinnier form, looking practically like a walking skeleton, with All Might being surprised to see Momo, with All Might saying, Yagirozu, why are you here? With Momo saying that after what happened, she doesn't want to leave Vegito's side if possible, with Momo asking All Might why he looks like a walking skeleton, as All Might says, it's due to an injury I got in a villain attack 5 years ago, and I would prefer to keep this form a secret from the public, so whenever you see me in this form at school, just call me Mr. Yagi, alright? Momo agrees to this, as another man who looks to be in his mid to late 30s comes in the room in a detective uniform, as All Might introduces the trio of children to Detective Tsukauchi, his friend from the police force. All Might's talk with Tsukauchi goes as canon, just that Vegito and Momo are present. After All Might and Tsukauchi leave, Lilith comes in to check on Vegito, as she overhears Momo and Izuku's plan to bring Vegito home, as Lilith then says, if you're gonna take Jeets home, then you'll likely meet Akari as well. But I do have one piece of advice for you, Yagirozu. Whatever you do, don't touch Akari's hair! We transition over to Akari, as she's talking to Kirara and Metal, with Akari looking rather worried, since Vegito's never been this late picking her up, with Fuyumi approaching the pair, saying, you're still here, Akari? I thought either Vegito or Izuku would come to get you by now. As Akari just looks up at Fuyumi with a look of serious worry plastered on her face, because this has never happened before. As Akari looks back at Metal, who's in her hands, and says, Metal, I hope Big Brother and Izuku are okay. As Fuyumi tells the child not to worry, and maybe that Vegito and Izuku got held up at school or something, before offering to take her home. since she has to take Kirara home anyway, and to live in the same apartment complex. Although Kirara asks who Izuku is, with Fuyumi saying Izuku is Akari's other brother, who Vegito usually trusts when taking Akari to and from school whenever he isn't able to do so himself, as Akari agrees to let Fuyumi take her home that night. Back in UA, Recovery Girl lets Vegito leave her office, but she prescribes absolutely no physically strenuous activity for 2 weeks, as to avoid making his injury worse, with Momo and Izuku promising to make sure Vegito takes it easy. After leaving Recovery Girl's office, Izuku and Momo help him try to get outside, with Ochako and Ida also stepping in to help, as the four prepare to get Vegito home. But before they can, a black armored sports car pulls up in front of them as the driver's side door opens, revealing All Might in his skeletal form. As Ochako asks, "Who's that?" with Momo introducing the skeletal man as Mr. Yagi, with All Might saying, "Get in. It would probably be easier to keep Vegito stable if he's moving less than he would if you walk," with Momo complimenting All Might on his smart thinking, before telling everyone they should get Vegito in the car, with Ida getting in the passenger seat, while Momo, Izuku, and Ochako are in the back seat with Vegito laying across him, with his head in Momo's lap, and Ochako in the middle, due to her being the smallest. After making sure everyone's in, All Might takes off in Hercules. Back over with Akari, Kirara, and Fuyumi. Akari is playing her copy of Pokemon Violet, and is currently in the middle of a battle with her Primeape against Rhyme's entire team, as she manages to win after she takes out Rhyme's Houndstone using her Primeape's Rage Fist, with this causing her Primeape to level up, as after the battle, Akari's Primeape starts to glow in an evolutionary light, as unbeknownst to Akari, she had met the evolving conditions for a Primeape to evolve into its final form, Annihilape. This also causes Akari to start crying at the realization that her Primeape is evolving, since she named it after Vegito, and Primeape canonically dies as it evolves, with Kirara noticing this and deciding to try comforting her best friend, and also leads to Kirara touching Akari's braid, which Akari ends up protecting her braid from Kirara, as Kirara decides to ask Fuyumi about this, saying, "Miss Todoroki, why is Akari protecting her hair from me?" As Akari also asks Fuyumi why Kirara tried touching her hair, with Fuyumi deciding to answer both children's questions, saying, "Akari, some people struggle with communication and social cues, and Kirara is one of them, so she didn't know you don't like most people touching your hair." Afterwards, Fuyumi says to Kirara, "I probably should have told you this earlier, but Akari has trust issues involving her hair. It's kinda similar to how you don't like having your tail pulled. Well, Akari doesn't like most people touching her hair." Kirara asks what caused that to happen, as Akari says while starting to tear up at remembering it, "It was Emma that caused it to happen." Kirara asks who Emma is, but before she can get an answer, they arrive at the apartment, where Fuyumi sees a fancy sports car or in Inko's designated parking space. Back with Vegito, Momo decides to ask Vegito about what Lilith said earlier. "Vegito, why doesn't Akari like people touching her hair?" With Vegito deciding to basically summarize the haircut incident, since that was what directly led to Akari's trust issues involving her hair. As Momo is shocked to hear this saying, "Poor baby!" while Ochako says that that's terrible, with Vegito agreeing with the girl's sentiments, adding, "And to this day, only 4 people have managed to earn Akari's trust with her hair. Myself, Izuku, Fuyumi, and Aunt Inko." Afterwards, the group arrives at the Midoriya apartment complex, with All Might pulling into Inko's designated parking space as Izuku gets the door open, as the 4 UA students try to get the injured Vegito out of the car, as All Might transforms to his buff form, using what little time he has left in the form for the day to carry Vegito up to Inko's apartment, with Ochako saying, "Wait! So Mr. Yagi is actually All Might?" As Zuko says Hitoshi Noriyagi is All Might's real name, as the sextet arrive at Inko's apartment. As the group hear another trio of footsteps approaching, as Fuyumi asks, All Might, what are you doing here? Before noticing the injured Saiyan in his arms, asking, Vegito, are you okay? Just then, Akari and Kirara approach as well, moving slower than Fuyumi due to their shorter legs. As Akari sees the same sight that Fuyumi is seeing and starts crying while running towards Vegito, saying, Daddy, are you okay? At the same time, Inko answers the door as Akari asks her dad if he's okay, with Inko saying, Akari, why are you crying? And why did you just call your brother Daddy? As Inko sees the injured Saiyan in All Might's arms, screaming out the name of her middle child as she asks for an explanation. With Izuku saying there was a villain attack at the school today, and worse, Goblin's back. And Vegito ended up taking one of his pumpkin bombs to the chest. Momo then interjects, saying they need to get inside, as Vegito's wound is starting to reopen. As All Might moves Vegito inside before placing the Saiyan on a couch. Akari takes off her boots and hops onto her favorite spot, with Vegito using his legs as makeshift back support for Akari, while Momo sits on the couch beside him, with Vegito laying his head on her lap, while Izuku and Ochako sit on the floor, while Ida joins the adults and Kirara at the table. Inko then decides to take a look at Vegito's injury and see how bad the damage is, as she's horrified to see the injuries, asking, Vegito, where's your left nipple? With Momo saying that it was incinerated in the blast. Afterwards, Akari asks, Daddy, aren't you going to introduce me to your friends? With Vegito saying, right. Akari, these are 3 of my classmates. The one on the floor next to Izuku is Ochako Uaraka. The one whose lap I'm laying on is Momo Yagirozu. And the one over there with Fuyumi, All Might, and Kirara is Tengai. As then, Vegito decides to tell his daughter everything that happened with Kaito and Emma at the USJ. With Akari saying, wait, does this mean I can start calling you Daddy full time? With Vegito saying yes. As Akari asks, even when we're in public? With Vegito saying that she can call him Daddy even when they're in public. With Akari being ecstatic at this news, saying, Yay! I love you, Daddy. Akari hugs Vegito, all this causes to say to wince in pain a bit due to his injury, saying, Careful! With Akari apologizing to her dad for accidentally hurting him. Afterwards, Akari looks at Momo and says, Momo, you're really pretty. I can see why my daddy likes you. Momo is really happy to hear the child call her pretty as she gets up to start changing Vegito's bandages. As during this time, Inko calls up Vito's Pizzeria and orders herself a dozen large pepperoni pizzas, which should be enough to feed everyone, even though she knows Vegito will likely be able to eat 3 of them on his own. After Momo gets Vegito's bandages changed, Akari turns to Ochako and says, Ochako, I think you would look really pretty with long hair. With Ochako asking, Really? I did have long hair for a while, but I got it cut before I took the entrance exam for UA. Akari asks why she got it cut, as Ochako says that her parents were worried it might become a safety hazard if it got snagged on something doing hero work. Adding that it turns out that if you can put it up like Momo does, it's no longer an issue. Akari takes this in and says, Well, if it's no longer an issue, then I think you should grow it back out again. As Fuyumi tells Ochako about the scalp massage that she told Vegito about the day of the haircut incident, while Vegito tells Ochako about the hair oils, with the Saiyan saying he recently bought some again to use on Akari's hair to help keep it healthy, with Vegito telling Izuku that he should try giving Ochako a scalp massage, since she wants to grow her hair back out, with Izuku asking Ochako if she's okay with that, with Ochako not really seeing a problem with it, and Izuku grabs the hair oils and gets to work on massaging Ochako's scalp, since he already knows how to do it after seeing Vegito massage Akari's scalp lots of times. During this, Vegito asks Ochako, You know, Uraka, I'm curious about something. Why did you decide to grow your hair long in the first place? With Ochako saying, Well, Vegito, I was actually inspired by your mom to grow it out initially. In fact, here's a picture of what I looked like with long hair, as Ochako shows Vegito a picture of what she looked like. with Akari saying, "Wow, I was right. You look really pretty with long hair, Ochako." Some time passes as Izuku finishes up the scalp massages as the doorbell rings, with Izuku answering the door to find a man in his early 20s with green scaly skin and pinkish purple hair. This is Spinner, and I know he was canonically a shut-in until the Stain incident, but he's gotta be able to pay the bills and get his game somehow. So I thought I'd give him a job delivering pizzas for Vio's Pizzeria. Izuku gives the man the money for the pizza as he leaves. Dinner's rather uneventful, other than Kirara decided to ask Fuyumi who Emma is, with Fuyumi explaining that Emma was Vegito's mom. As Kirara asks, if Emma was Vegito's mom, then why was Akari upset mentioning her? Fuyumi then says, well, Kirara, the reason why Akari was upset mentioning Emma is because due to the incident that caused her trust issues involving your hair, Akari was afraid of her for a while due to how she reacted to the whole incident. Akari starts crying during Fuyumi's explanation, with Vegito saying, "Aw, come here, sweetie," while Momo rubs Akari's back, saying, "It's okay, Akari. Your daddy and I won't let her hurt you anymore." The trio then hug, and this manages to calm the child down. Afterwards, Fuyumi, Kirara, and All Might leave, since Fuyumi needs to get Kirara home, since, while she only lives 3 doors down from Minko, her grandparents are likely going to be worried about her coming home so late. Afterwards, Akari asks her dad, "Daddy, can you take my braid out?" With Vegito trying to, but due to his left arm still hurting, he isn't able to without accidentally pulling her hair. So Momo says, "Well, Akari, I can take a braid out for you if you want." Akari then protects her braid from Momo. As Vegito says, Recovery Girl said that I shouldn't use my left arm for the rest of the day, and I don't want to accidentally pull your hair. Plus, Momo helped me get home safe, so she should be fine with your hair. Plus, you saw her change my bandages, and she helped Metal and I comfort you earlier. With this and Momo's earlier actions, managed to convince Akari to let Momo take her braid out, as she hops off of Vegito to go get her hairbrush, while Vegito gives Momo some advice about Akari, saying, "One thing I'll go and say with Akari is try to be gentle with her hair, cause she does not like having her hair pulled in the slightest." Momo takes this in and agrees, as Akari comes back over to the duo with her hairbrush, crawling into Momo's lap and handing her the brush. After a couple minutes, Momo takes Akari's braid out and starts brushing her hair a bit, as this makes Akari happy, with Vegito saying, "See, sweetie, I told you Momo should be fine with your hair." After brushing Akari's hair, Momo wraps her arms around Akari in a hug. As Akari thinks to herself, "This warmth I'm feeling, could Momo possibly become the mommy I always wanted but never had?" Akari then spins around on Momo's lap as she returns the hug given to her by Momo, with Momo being really happy at Akari returning her hug. Later, when they're in the bed, Ida is on the couch, Izuku and Ochako are in Izuku's bed, while Vegito, Momo, and Akari are in Vegito's bed, with Momo's head being where Vegito's left nipple used to be, while Akari is using Vegito's chest as a pillow, and she's having a rather nasty nightmare, as she sees the USJ attack from Momo's perspective, as Vegito ends up taking the pumpkin bomb, but here, it's aimed higher at the Saiyan's neck, killing the young Saiyan. Akari starts crying at seeing this nightmare, as she sees her dad dying. As Akari's crying wakes up Vegito and Momo, with the pair also trying to not only comfort Akari, but also wake her up, so she can see it was only a bad dream, with Akari saying through tears, "Please don't die, Daddy, I still need you," with Vegito saying, "It's okay, sweetie, you just had a bad dream is all. Daddy's gonna be okay," with this being able to calm her down, with Akari going back to sleep, this time using Momo's chest as a pillow. The next morning, Inko wakes up the 6 children for breakfast, finding Ida on the couch, which she isn't really fazed by, before heading to the boys' room, as she finds Izuku cuddling with Ochako, with Inko saying, "I'm too young to be a grandma," with this waking up Izuku and Ochako, as the trio see Momo and Akari cuddling with Vegito in Vegito's bed. Aww, it's like those 3 are like a little family, as Akari nuzzles Momo's chest and says as she wakes up, "Mommy,